Commando Carbine was supposed to issue in a new era of flexibility, in terms of weaponry at least, for the medic class. Long plagued by the lack of flexible weaponry in the SMG category, it should now be able to engage targets not only at close medium range, but also medium and medium long range, thanks to the now available Carbine class. Regrettably, and as the title of this video suggests, that is not really the case, and the Commando Carbine, in my honest opinion, is one of, if not the worst primary weapon available in Battlefield 5 on a purely objective basis. Thus, in today's weapon review, we'll be looking at the stats of the Commando Carbine, the specializations available and that I would recommend, how it performs in comparison to some of the other weaponry within the medic class, but more importantly, the wider class of weaponry available out there, and of course, lastly, how to get the most out of this weapon when using it on the battlefield. Now, of course, this weapon has been out for only a few hours, and thus, we don't have the full set of stats just yet. Nevertheless, I can give you a quick rundown of some of the basics. With a maximum damage of 56 and a minimum damage of 30, you've got a 2 to 4 shot kill weapon here, meaning in close quarters, 2 body shots will do the trick, 1 headshot as well. At longer ranges, you're going to have to either double dome somebody or actually get 4 body shots to take them out. This is paired, regrettably, with an extraordinarily low fire rate at 93 rounds per minute, meaning that your DPS on any target at any range is pretty much abysmal. This comes paired with a relatively limited magazine if you compare it to something like the semi-autos, but relatively large magazine if you compare it to something like the SLRs or bolt-action rifles at 8 shots available. Now, if you go through certain specializations, you will be able to up both the magazine and the fire rate. We'll get into that in just a second, but you're ultimately left with probably one of, if not the slowest primary DPS weapon in the game. For a matter of fact, weapons such as the revolver, as secondary, will be able to outdamage this thing at most ranges as it stands right now. In terms of specializations then, without going through the full detailed list, because that is at this point not too interesting, there's essentially 2 choices you have. Either you go all left, or you go all right. The left being the more flexible, moving and hipfire focused build at the cost of reduced damage because you won't be getting an upgrade to the weapon's fire rate, and the right hand side focuses a little bit more on ADS, aiming down sight, that is, a slightly larger mag and the higher fire rate to help with that DPS on target. In my opinion, clearly given this weapon's lack of damage, you're going to want to go for the right hand side, but I'm open to arguments as to why you would go for the left hand side as well. Leave those down below in the comments as per usual. With your weapon then set up, with 109 rounds per minute in terms of its fire rate and 11 shots to go, how are you actually going to end up taking out targets? What makes this weapon unique and how does it compare to the competition? Well, the one grace, or saving grace if you so will, of the Commando Carbine, besides that it's pretty cool because it's silenced, is that it has a one-shot headshot potential despite its significantly higher fire rate compared to some of the bolt-action rifles. If you compare this to something like the SLR, so the Autoloading 835 or the RSC, this is unique in that those weapons cannot one-shot headshot kill no matter the range they are, no matter how close you are. Thus, theoretically, this could be one of the best weapons in the game if you were playing as an individual who could basically headshot everybody up until about 30 meters, which is where you lose that one-shot headshot kill. Now, in practice, because of the way that close quarters and close medium range combat works, essentially the only time this is going to happen is if you flank somebody, and if you flank somebody, every weapon is good enough to take them out. To be very honest with you, at 30 meters you could be using a revolver and would still be able to take them out successfully. I'd just like to note that in slightly more close quarters, a revolver can even get a one-shot headshot kill. So if you actually go up against a Commando Carbine in close quarters, let's say up until 10-12 meters, your revolver is actually a better choice than trying to fight them with your actual primary, your Commando Carbine. But that, of course, would be fine if this was a weapon like a bolt action, for example, not at all thought for close encounter combat, but more geared towards the longer range, medium range. The problem there, of course, besides the fact that it no longer has a one-shot headshot kill, unlike all of the bolt-action rifles, I'd like to point out at this point, which have not quite as high fire rates, but still up until the 80s if you upgrade them correctly, and thus relatively competitive compared to this weapon. Well, you also don't have a good body shot to kill ratio. At 3 or 4 shots, you're getting outdamaged by weapons such as the Autoloading 835 or the ZH29, let alone an SGG44 by a factor of 200 to 300%. In other words, those weapons, if they have 100% accuracy and you do as well, will be able to take out 2 or 3 people in the time it's going to take you to take them out. So for comparison's sake, if we go to the more medium long ranges where this weapon slips up to a 4 bullet kill, you compete with an Autoloading 835, that weapon not only has pretty much double the fire rate at 200 rounds per minute, depending on your specializations, slightly less than double or slightly more than double the fire rate, but it also has a bullet to kill less. Now yes, you have a magazine disadvantage there, but if that's the issue, then compare this weapon to a BF5. 3 bullets to kill at all ranges paired with 299 rounds per minute. This weapon will require 4 rounds to down its target and fires at 109 rounds per minute. The best way to actually put this in perspective is to compare it to the STG-44. If you're wanting the Commando Carbine to put out as much damage as the STG-44 at those more medium-long ranges, it would have to have a fire rate around about 400 rounds per minute and not the 109 maximum that it currently sits at. Thus, in terms of one-on-ones and competitiveness, this weapon is garbage tier, far below anything else really we have as it stands right now, comparable really to the Liberator in terms of how competitive it really is. Now, the frustrating part, of course, about all this is that, well, the medic sorely needs a more flexible class of weaponry, and independent on how they decide to design it, it needs to be at least capable at a certain engagement distance. Now, you could argue with me that it's fine that this weapon is much weaker because the medic has unlimited heals, but if we start balancing weapons on the basis of classes, then we're ignoring a supposed inherent class imbalance and kind of trying to make good of that with bad weapons, and that is not actually an enjoyable way to balance or play a game, if you ask me personally, and thus weapons always need to be competitive, at least at one or multiple engagement distances to any of the competition out there. And as it stands now, the Commando Carbine clearly isn't. In terms of offering fixes on how to make this weapon essentially semi-competitive, well, if you're going for that more medium range and you don't want it to be a long-range weapon, you don't want it to compete with some of the bolt actions, you're going to have to extend its medium-range capabilities, which means giving it something like a one-shot headshot kill range, not only to 30 meters, but let's say up until maybe 50 meters, and from that point onwards, a 3-shot body shot kill. But even then, if you compare it to something like a BF5 or a ZH-29, you'd still be losing out badly against those weapons, but you'd be a little bit closer in terms of competitiveness to some of the other weapons out there. So as it stands now, regrettably, I can't recommend this weapon at all. If you go through the actual trouble of unlocking it, feel free to let me know down below in the comments what you think of the weapon or if I'm missing out any major strength of it. As said, unless you're an absolute headshot god and can consistently headshot moving targets up until 30 meters at 100% accuracy rate, this weapon is garbage. If you can do that and you're essentially Battlefield Jesus, well then this is probably the best weapon currently in the game. With that being said then, let me know down below in the comments what you think not only of this weapon, but also this video, as well as of course your usual video suggestions and feedback. Feel free to hit me up with those on Twitter as well. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful or interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.